Good evening, everyone. My name is Heather Sargent, and I'm the Communication Director for Georgian Bay Forever, a charity that works on the protection of the water. While we are meeting on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we call home. This land is the traditional territories of the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Confederacy, and the Mississaugas of the Credit River First Nations. Ontario is covered by 46 treaties and other agreements, and is home to many Indigenous nations from across Turtle Island, including the Inuit and the Métis. We are all treaty people, and we are mindful of the serious harms and mistakes of the past and acknowledge the importance of responsibilities that we have to each other and to the land, and we seek to move forward in a spirit of collaboration and reconciliation. Today, we're here to discuss microfiber emissions into water bodies from laundering our clothes that impact water quality and aquatic life, and how we can work together to mass scale a solution to stop most of them. In our registration survey, we asked you what water bodies you care about. And while you certainly care about Georgian Bay, 74% of you care about all marine and freshwater bodies. That fits perfectly into what we're going to talk about today, in that we have conducted a study done with the University of Toronto in Parry Sound, Georgian Bay, that demonstrates that there is a solution, and that if it is mass scaled, it can affect all these water bodies. The webinar will go as follows. We will be doing a short overview of what microfibers and microplastics are and why they are a concern, followed by a presentation of evidence supporting washing machine filters as a way of stopping microfiber pollution, and following up with a panel that will discuss ways that you can support filters being mass scaled. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box, not the chat box. The chat box just has housekeeping rules and will have a series of important links in it. We will have a very short question period at the end, and we will try to answer as many questions as we can. If we don't get to your questions, we will do so in follow-up communications. The webinar today will be recorded and posted, and you can always reach out to us if you have further queries. I am now going to introduce Brooke Harrison, the Georgian Bay coordinator on our project Divert and Capture, the fight to keep microplastics out of our water. And she will provide an overview of microfibers and microplastics and why we should be concerned.
Thank you, Heather. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. I have been the project coordinator at Georgian Bay Forever Divert and Capture program since 2019, and excited to be here tonight to share the results in partnership with Elisa Erdl. Tonight, we are going to discuss what we can all do right now to prevent microfibers from entering our environment. Microfibers are anthropogenic fibers less than 5 millimeters in size. Our clothes are commonly made with synthetic materials like polyester, nylon, or spandex. Although there are non-synthetic fibers such as cotton and wool, it has been identified that all of these fibers are still contaminating habitats and wildlife. These fibers are persistent in the environment, and once they're in the environment, they're nearly impossible to remove and continue to get smaller and smaller in size. Microfibers can enter the environment in a variety of ways, but one way we know for sure is through us laundering our clothes in our washing machines. A single load of laundry can release up to 700,000 fibers per load, which has led to microfibers being the most common type of microplastics in the environment. Microfibers are the most common type of microplastics that we are seeing in the oceans, and the Great Lakes are no exemption. Georgian Bay and the Great Lakes provide us with recreational waters, commercial opportunities, drinking water, and so much more. When we think about Georgian Bay, we often think about the crystal clear, beautiful waters, but what we now know is how polluted they really are from these microfibers. Many of these fibers and plastics we can't see with the naked eye, but many of these microplastics can be the most harmful to the ecosystem as they easily get in the food chain and travel through the trophic levels. With 34 million people living around the Great Lakes and 34 million people adding stress and pollutants to the Great Lakes, we often hear about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, but what may surprise you is that we're seeing microfiber concentrations equal or higher in the Great Lakes than we are seeing in the ocean. We're seeing fibers in fish, sediment, water samples all around from different ecosystems such as the Arctic sea ice, Arctic sea floor, oceans, agriculture fields, and so much more. Both synthetic materials, which are the plastic materials, and modified natural fibers, such as cotton, are a cause for concern in the aquatic environment. Research done by the Rochman lab show that microfibers are being found in offshore fish from Lake Huron and Lake Ontario. Recent research shows that microfibers are in the Great Lakes species of fish such as yellow perch, brown bullhead, white sucker, and shiners. This research found that fish contained up to 915 anthropogenic particles per fish, which were mostly fibers. We are seeing microplastics in almost every species studied from the Arctic, Pacific, Atlantic, and the Great Lakes. You can just go to the next slide there. Animals interact with plastics through ingestion, entanglement, and net use. We have all seen the disturbing images online of nests being created with plastics or stomach contents completely filled with plastics. Animals are consuming plastics and then they're starving to death because physically they are full, but the plastics in there are not able to digest in their stomachs. Microfibers have been found to be ingested in wildlife in places such as the Marianas Trench. In seafood, microfibers have been found to be the dominant particle type, and microfibers can easily transfer through the trophic levels. What I hope this is showing is that we know microfibers are in the environment, and we also know now that there is a solution to stop it at the source. A study on 3 of the Great Lakes, Lake Superior, Lake Huron, and Lake Erie, have shown that the average abundance in surface water was approximately 43,000 microplastic particles per square kilometer. In 2014, surface water was sampled in Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, and the rivers that feed into them, recording abundances of microplastics between 90,000 and 6.7 million particles per square kilometers. These levels of microplastics are similar to and even exceed concentrations that we're seeing in the ocean and in ocean gyres such as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Next slide there. And not to alarm everyone, but it's not just the animals that are consuming this plastics. Humans are as well. Humans consume the size of a credit card of plastic every single week. The more we rely on plastics and mismanage our waste around plastic, this amount is increasing very quickly. And it's not just fish. We know it's in our drinking water. We know it's in our beer, our salt, the fish we eat, and the air we breathe. Researchers estimate that 4.8 million tons of synthetic microfibers, such as the polyester and nylon, have entered water bodies and terrestrial environments since 1950. We do not necessarily know what this means to human health quite yet, but we do know that it needs to change. We know it's in the water. We know it's in different ecosystems. We know it's in the fish that we're consuming, the water we're consuming. It's in our weather systems. And what are the effects? Mounting evidence shows that negative impacts can include decreased feeding and growth and decreased fertility. There's a quick growing amount of research underway on the impacts of microplastics and microfibers in the environment. We don't have all the answers yet, but we do know that the composition of these harmful plastics are harmful to the environment and the ecosystems and humans due to their small size and their ease of way to travel through the trophic levels. This is what brings us to Divert and Capture, a partnership that we started back in 2019 with the Rochman Lab at University of Toronto. We set out to complete these 3 goals, to do shoreline cleanups around Georgian Bay, to provide information through webinars and workshops. And then what we're going to focus on today is to physically divert these microplastics and microfibers from entering the source, which is using these washing machines, which is Lisa is going to touch on shortly. I just want to quickly say thank you to the almost 100 households in Parry Sound that participated in this study. It looks like some of you are able to join us today, so we really thank you, and this project wouldn't have been able to be completed without their help and dedication over the 2-year period. And lastly, I just want to say thank you to the many donors and funders and partners that made Divert and Capture possible. Because of these organizations and groups and individuals, we are one step closer to being able to stop microfiber pollution at the source, which is our laundry machines. And with that, I want to introduce Elisa Erdl from the Rochman lab at University of Toronto and from Five Gyres. She is here to present the results of diversion capture.
Thanks so much. And thanks so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure over these last few years to work with Georgian and Bay Forever on this study. And it's very exciting that we have people around the world that are paying attention to this work that was really spearheaded by Georgian Bay Forever and helping inform policies related to this work. So I think, David, if you could get to my slides, next one. Perfect. So studies show that a single load of laundry can release up to hundreds of thousands of microfibers into washing machine effluent. And Brooke talked a little bit about this too, that there are other sources of microfibers. We know that microfibers are also shed from carpets, fibers can come from dryers, also things like fishing nets and cigarette butts. But we know the most about washing clothing. And when washing effluent is carried to a wastewater treatment plant, some of these fibers are released directly into aquatic ecosystems in the effluent from the wastewater treatment plants. And studies from the Great Lakes show that a single plant can release more than 4 million microplastics in a single day. And most of these microplastics are fibers. So we looked at this and recognized that reducing microfibers at this emission source could be an effective solution to addressing a major contributor of microfiber pollution. Next slide, please. So as a pilot, we first investigated the effectiveness of two technologies marketed to reduce microfiber emissions. And we did this in our lab. We bought a washing machine for the lab to do other contaminant work as well. And this work was led by two undergraduate students, Haley and Jack. And what they did was they did loads of laundry. They washed a polyester fleece blanket from IKEA, those red blankets they're wearing as capes. And they did this both with and without these devices. And one is a device that goes directly in the wash, and the other an external filter that collects the fibers from washing machine effluent. Next slide, please. So we quantified the efficacy of mitigating fibers in the wash, and here are the results from our pilot study, which we published in 2019. This is a box plot of the mean fibers per liter of washing machine effluent. And without either device, we found an average of around 5,000 microfibers per liter. So over 100,000 microfibers in the wash. And both devices reduced the number of microfibers per liter of effluent and did so by an average of 26% and 87%, which demonstrated that filters added to washing machines significantly reduce fibers that are shed from garments when we wash our clothes, which means that these filters added to machines can reduce the number of microfibers that are entering wastewater treatment plants or entering into septic tanks. Next slide, please. And so what we did after this initial study that we published, we followed up with an additional filter, and we'll be talking about it more today, the Filtrol, and this work was done by Sam Athey, a PhD student that I've been working really closely with throughout my PhD. And Sam found that the Filtrol led to an 89% fiber reduction by weight when she measured the washing machine effluent. Next slide, please. So then this takes us to our community scale project. So as a proof of concept, what we really wanted to do is scale up our study from the lab and put these filters then into a community. So Parry Sound was really the perfect town to do this sort of study. It's sort of the Goldilocks town where it's big enough to have a municipal wastewater treatment plant, but also small enough where the number of filters we installed might have a measurable effect. So with Georgian Bay Forever, University of Toronto designed and ran this study with nearly 100 filters. And we measured the treated final effluent at the wastewater treatment plant across 4 different sample periods, and each sample was a 24-hour composite sample of effluent. So taking effluent regularly throughout the day to account for any sort of daily variation that there might be in the effluent. And we also collected lint over 2 years across 4 different collections. And since we know that these filters are effective when we tested them in the lab, this really gave us an opportunity to see if they're also effective at reducing fibers when we look at a community by having these filters in about 10% of all homes. Next slide, please. And so here's what we found. This plot shows the average number of fibers per liter for the composite samples at 4 different sample periods, 2 immediately before installing the filters and 2 after the install. And what we saw was a significant decrease among the wastewater collected before the filter install and after. So it really suggests that these filters work. Next slide, please. And throughout the 2-year study, we were also monitoring the lint that was captured in the filter bags. All the volunteers diligently saved the lint that was trapped in their filters, and Brooke would go and pick them up and then take them down to our lab at U of T. And this is just a picture of a very small piece of laundry lint photographed under the microscope. And you see this tangle of microfibers in a small sample, a sample of lint that's smaller than a pea size. And there are many hundreds of fibers in this small sample. Next slide, please. And when we characterize the lint samples, we see a lot of microfibers. Really, most of the mass is fibers, but these filters are also capturing other particles too. And these are just some examples of what was caught in the filter, where we saw other microplastics like sequins and glitter. Often, I think the ones with lots of sequins and glitter were households that had kids. Next slide, please. And when we scale up the results from our study in Parry Sound, where we have 97 washing machine filters added to a community with about 1 in 10 households, where each household is capturing around 6.4 grams of laundry lint each week. What we counted the fibers that were in each gram of lint. And when we scale this up, if we were to have filters in every household in a city like Toronto or LA, this is in the range of trillions of microfibers captured per year by installing these filters on washing machines. Next slide, please. And just to sum up, this study found that a widespread deployment of washing machine filters into homes is an effective solution to prevent microfiber emissions. And we installed filters in about 10% of households in Parry Sound, found that these filters lead to a significant reduction in microfibers. And in analyzing the lint samples from the filters, we found an average weekly lint capture of 6.4 grams of lint, equivalent to nearly 200,000 to over 2 million microfibers, depending on the household. And this really shows that a solution is effective at scale, and a next logical step could be to have all these filters built directly into washing machines to capture microfiber emissions. So this work is being used to inform policy both in Canada and has informed draft bills in California and policy in the UK and in France. So with that, I'll hand it over and happy to talk more about those policy discussions too.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for your wonderful presentation, and thanks for zooming in from your vacation. Your dedication and work is truly amazing, and we really appreciate it. We're now going to spend some time talking about the scaling of the filter solutions. So as Lisa noted, filters can be effective at scale to reduce microfiber emissions into the environment. And right now, though, very few people are using them. So what can we do? Certainly, there are things that we can do as individuals to reduce our own microfiber emission footprint, so to speak. You can look into purchasing a filter. Some of the ones that we've talked about today have been scientifically tested, as Lisa has informed us about. And those are the Wexco Filtrol 160 and the Microplastics Lover. And these are available online in Canada. Next slide, please, David. So if you can consider a filter, that's definitely the gold standard for reducing your microfiber emissions that escape into our aquatic environments. But there's also other things that you can do to reduce your microfiber footprint. You can reduce the amount of times that you launder. You can wash in cold water and make sure that they're full loads. If you're in the market for a new washing machine, buy a front loader, because the agitation on those means that the shedding of the clothes is less. And if you have to buy clothes, buy them so that they're durable, or buy used clothes. The thing you want to do is avoid fast fashion. And of course, you want to avoid plastics. We have enough plastic emissions into the environment. But I think you've heard today that plastics aren't the only microfiber emission problems. The reality is that our clothing bits do not belong in our waters. So I really want to stress that it's really important to take those individual actions towards your own emissions, but you can also help scale this to other households. And that is really important, because there are hurdles to everyone kind of adopting these behaviors. And those hurdles include price. The price of these filters range from anywhere from $180 to $220. Availability, as far as I understand, these are only available online, and sometimes they run out of stock. These filters don't fit into every laundry room. They're about the size of a paper towel dispenser, and we found that they don't fit in about a quarter of all laundry rooms. And there's very little awareness of this issue. So again, as Lisa alluded to, there is a role that policy can play to help kind of mass scale the solution to many more households and get many more filters on washing machines. And I'm not going to talk about all the policy that we think would be effective, but today I'm going to focus on the low-hanging fruit, which is Ontario Bill 279, which is a private member's bill that seeks to amend the Environmental Protection Act to prohibit sales of washing machines in the future without a filter. So therefore, future washing machines would have a filter. So that's one step towards mitigating this problem. And it's an important step, and it needs support to move forward. I want to stress that Georgian Bay Forever is a nonpartisan organization. We support this bill, but we don't particularly support any party or leader. And our support of this bill is because the science has shown us that it's important to get more filters on washing machines. So having said that, I want to introduce a few different tools that are available for you to help mass scale this solution and support Bill 279. A really important one is to write an email letter to your home member of the provincial parliament. And the Georgian Bay Association has done a fantastic job and created a website page that has an email template that is going to facilitate your ability to send a letter to your local MPP, as well as other really important dignitaries. And we're going to talk about that with Rupert a little bit later on. And I know you're seeing Vera's URLs flash by. Believe me, those will also be in the chat, and we're going to make it available to you in a thank you note that goes out to you. Next slide, please. If you're a public-facing business or an organization, that you have the ability to download a written paper petition and make that available to your customers. And once you've gathered some signatures, you can mail it in to MPP Bell. And we're going to talk to Ms. Bell about why that can be effective as well. Next slide, please. And if you're a municipal representative, there are things that you can do as well. You can pass a resolution. The Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities initiative has a resolution on their website that was sponsored by the Township of the Archipelago. You can also pass this resolution. And I can also say that you can also send a letter to the government to follow your resolutions to show how much passion you have for solving this particular issue. And if you want more information on microfibers or where to find these templates, please contact me at heathersargent@gbf.org. Next slide, please. Now, I just want to introduce our panelists. We have a member of Provincial Parliament, Jessica Bell, from the riding of University Rosedale. We have Rupert Kindersley, who's the Executive Director of the Georgian Bay Association. And we have Phil Murphy-Rayom, who's the Canada Policy Director from the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative. And I'm going to start by asking MPP Bell a couple of questions. Ms. Bell, why did you introduce this bill?
Hello, everyone. I'm Jessica Bell, the MPP for University Rosedale. I introduced this bill because I was approached by MPP Ian Arthur. He is the member for Kingston and the Thousand Islands. And he asked me to collaborate with him on this bill because he knew that I have had a 20-year involvement in environmental justice and community organising. And he also knew that I cared, like him, very deeply about protecting our Great Lakes and Canada's waterways. So when he asked me to help, I said, yes, 100% right away, let's make this happen. And we introduced the bill very quickly after he suggested that we do that.
That's amazing. And can you tell us a little bit about the status of the bill?
Yeah, so every legislative session, we get to introduce as many bills as we want. And we introduced Bill 279 in the last legislative session. It's at what's called first reading. Because the government prorogued the session, it means that we need to introduce it again for the final legislative session before the election. We started the legislative session on Tuesday, February 22nd, and this session is going to go for about 8 weeks. It's my intention to introduce this bill as soon as possible. That means it'll be given a new number, the same title, and it gives us all an opportunity to organize it around it and really communicate with our MPPs and say, look, this is a bill on the docket. It'd be great if you could pass it. So that will be my goal, and I'd be happy to come up with a time that really works for people who also care about this bill.
And how does writing your MPP help? And even if it says Bill 279, does that still help?
Yes, yes, it does. People, yes, that's an excellent question. It still helps. People know what this bill is. Bill numbers regularly change. So they know that this is a microplastic bill and its goal is to protect our precious Great Lakes and our waterways. It helps a lot to communicate with your local MPP. Writing a letter helps a lot. The more personalized it is, the better. So if it's if you speak from your own experience, why the Great Lakes matter to you, it adds extra weight. If you write a joint letter, maybe on behalf of your local parent council or your class or your local municipality, it gives it even extra weight. We get a lot of mail, every MPP does. And the more weight or people that you know are standing behind a letter, the more likely it is that an MPP will sit up and take notice.
And I should just clarify that an email has the same weight as a letter. Is that accurate?
So that's interesting that you say that. If we get 5 personalized emails from constituents in a riding, this is my position, I will schedule a one-on-one phone call with the people that are communicating with me to find out more about the issue. I find a letter is worth a little bit more because it shows that someone has made an extra effort, but a personalized email goes a long way too.
And so I talked about a written petition, and I'm really interested to understand how that helps bring weight towards legislation.
So that's a very sensible and easy way for people to rally support for this microplastics bill. There's petitions can only be read if people sign a piece of paper. So online petitions don't work in the same way. And there's a set format that a petition needs to have. It has to have certain words at the front to make it eligible for an MPP to read into the legislature. And I'm happy to send a template after this Zoom meeting so you know what wording it has to say. It's very simple. It has to say something like, we direct the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, but I'll send it to you so you know.
We already
and then-
have it, so we're way ahead, and it's
Yes,
ready to be
amazing. Oh my
downloaded.
goodness, I'm so
Yeah.
pleased. Thank you for bringing that up. And then the final thing I want to say is the reason why petitions are so valuable is that every day at about either 1 p.m. or 3 p.m., MPPs have upwards of 15 minutes to read petitions out loud to each other in the legislature. And then we get to show how many pieces of paper we're holding. It is a very practical, useful way for us to raise this issue with all the MPPs in the House. And it's also a useful way for you to communicate one-on-one with your neighbours and have a conversation with them about how this bill is so important and getting their signature. Those conversations are key to getting this bill to become the law of the province.
I have one more question for you. When municipalities send resolutions that they've passed to the government, and is that also noticed and helpful towards passing a bill?
Absolutely. Some of the work that I have done to move the government on issues that I care about, the big one has been stopping some bus services cuts in more rural areas. We have achieved that by communicating directly with municipalities, phoning them up as councillors and mayors and asking them to pass a resolution in support of what we're fighting for. And that resolution, it's very good. There's municipalities that have already done this. So it's easy for councillors to literally copy and paste what another municipality has done and present it to their fellow colleagues in another area. And usually when a resolution is passed, it will involve city staff or municipal staff then writing a letter to the local MPP, telling them that this resolution has passed and that they want action on it. It is an extremely effective way for MPPs to get legislation passed. I highly recommend that strategy.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Ms. Bell, for your time and bringing this bill forward. And I hope you'll stick around for some questions. But let me turn my attention to the wonderful Rupert Kindersley from the Georgian Bay Association to tell us a little bit about who the GBA represents as a start.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you for inviting me tonight. So my name's Rupert Kindersley. I'm the Executive Director of the Georgian Bay Association. For those of you who don't know about us, we are an umbrella advocacy organization of 18 community associations along the east and north shores of Georgian Bay, representing around 3,000 families. We have been around for 106 years, and our primary objectives are to protect the Georgian Bay environment and the interests of our members. That to cover that question?
Yeah, thank you. Let me ask you, why is the GBA concerned about microfiber and microplastic pollution?
Okay, so there is rising concern amongst our members on the proliferation of microfiber and microplastic pollution, and we are quite aware of that. We partner with GBF, as you know, on many issues, and supporting Bill 279 to get filters installed on new washing machines is another example of a productive complementary partnership. Also, this is something that our members and you, who are not members on this call, can do. You can take action on this directly and make a difference, as we've just heard. We already have a tool on our website, which we've used before. So we just repurposed it for this Bill 279. And it's really easy to do. The link is in the chat box. You simply input your email address and home postcode, and the GBA and this portal will automatically generate an email letter to your local home MPP where you vote. Incidentally, it gets copied to Premier Doug Ford, MEC Minister David Piccini, his Parliamentary Assistant Andrea Kangin, Government House Leader Paul Calandra, Jessica and Ian, the NDP leader Andrea Horwath, and the Liberal leader Stephen DeLuca. You can change the letter or not as you wish, so it's a very flexible arrangement. And as Jessica was saying, it is a good idea to personalize the letter if you want to take some extra time. But if you just want to send the letter, takes less than a minute to do. We've also used our other direct communications channels to ask members for their support on this, and asked our member associations to get the message out to their members. We've also written directly to the government on this matter, using another tool that we have, which automatically sends a letter to every MPP. And I will stick a link to that letter in the chat box in case anybody is interested.
That is really fantastic support, Rupert, and thank you for sharing that. I'm just going to turn my attention now over to Phil from the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative. Phil, can you tell me a little bit about the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative? What's it all about?
Sure. Thanks, Heather, for the question, and also for the invitation to join today. It's nice to be among like-minded people helping to drive a cleaner and safer Great Lakes. So the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative is a binational coalition of more than 125 mayors across the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence River. So our membership represents nearly 19 million Americans and Canadians. And our focus is around protecting and restoring the Great Lakes. We recently developed our strategic priorities, which included addressing coastal resilience and climate adaptation issues, supporting a sustainable blue economy in the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence, addressing water equity issues across our region on both sides of the border. And the one that brings me tonight is around protecting water quality in our Great Lakes. And so that's basically what we do. We're a organization that's focused on advocacy, collaboration, and education. As our executive director likes to use the acronym ACE. So we work with our mayors to push forward policy issues both at the federal and provincial levels in Ontario and Quebec. And I guess I'll stop there so you can ask your next question. Thanks, Heather.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Phil. We know that the Township of the Archipelago sponsored a resolution that was passed at the annual meeting, calling for governments to pass policy that requires more filters on washing machines, including the passing of Bill 279, but also asking for, federal legislation and more. Can you share with us how your organization is garnering support for policy?
Sure. Well, I want to start off by thanking the township for their leadership. They were actually quite productive in getting 2 resolutions passed at our AGM last year. The first one around banning unencapsulated dock foam, and then the second one around regulating washing machines so that microfilters are installed. With respect to how we generally drive policy with these resolutions, in the same way that a municipality and the resolution that they have, or if they pass a resolution, usually our resolutions will call on us as an organization to contact different government representatives to help move that policy along, or to communicate that resolution back to the different government representatives that they've identified. And so what we've done with this resolution is we're packaging it as part of our pre-budget submission federally. So actually today I sent out our pre-budget submission, which did include a request to regulate washing machines per the resolution that was passed. That was also copying, so that was sent directly to the finance minister and copied the Minister of Environment and a whole series of other federal cabinet ministers. What I'll be doing over the next few days as well is sharing that letter with MPs across the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence region. And so that's one way to help raise the profile. Heather, you and I are working on figuring out how we can get this policy in front of the federal government, and working with federal MPs to potentially put forward a PMB or private members bill like Ms. Bell has done. And want to take this opportunity to also thank you, Ms. Bell, for your leadership on this issue. In terms of what we're doing provincially, so we are raising this issue with the minister and his office. The other thing that we're doing ahead of provincial elections, and it so happens that we have provincial elections both in Ontario and Quebec this year. So we're putting together working groups with our members in both provinces to come together with a policy package that we'll put forward to the different parties ahead of the elections, hoping to see that reflected, some if not all of those policies reflected in those platforms, and setting up meetings with the different parties again to have those discussions and help. Again, because when you present this in written format, it's a little less powerful than if you can get in front of an elected official and have that conversation. Admittedly, before I started with the Cities Initiative, I was aware of the plastics issue. I was aware of the microplastics issue, but when it came down to microfibers, I was completely unaware. And so I think there's a role for us to play as an organization in raising this profile, not only with the senior levels of government, but also with our own membership. And that's something that we, as an organization, I think there's maybe a bit more awareness on the Canadian side of things, but luckily, because we're a binational organization, we can help educate our municipalities south of the border and hope to get some traction on that side as well.
Well, thank you so much, Phil. I think I want to thank this panel very much, and I hope you stick around for questions because we're going to enter into the question period. My purpose for bringing this panel forward was to show all of you out there that there is support by really important people and organizations behind solving this issue. And if we all work together, for sure we can make this happen. So now we're just going to move to some questions. I know there's been a lot of questions about septic systems. So I'm going to turn this over, I guess, first to Brooke to talk about should filters be used on washing machines that go to septic systems, and Lisa and David, feel free to jump in as well.
Great. Yeah, a lot of questions on septics, and these filters were actually first designed for septics to prevent them from clogging from these microplastics and microfibers. So in a typical septic system, approximately 50 to 70% of the wastewater treatment is completed in the septic bed, and the remaining particles are removed there from the water. The fibers are often far too small, so they're too small to be filtered out by the gravel and sand, so they can flow right through, and then in that case entering through the environment into the surface and groundwater from these septics. And additionally, often septic beds, when they are emptied, they are brought to a local wastewater treatment plant. So again, they're still in the same system, whether you are on town water or bringing it from your septic. So it really does highlight that the easiest way to stop these fibers from entering the environment is again through stopping them at the source.
That's really great. Lisa or David, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, just that, you know, when these particles are going through the septic bed and entering the soil, we don't know a lot about how these particles can move within a soil profile, but there's been a lot of research recently that shows that these fibers can impact soil properties and how plants grow. So if they are sort of bypassing, you know, a tank and going into the soil, it could have those impacts and could potentially leach into groundwater, which Brooke said.
And just to clarify, the sludge that's produced is often spread on farm fields as a kind of form of using the nutrients, but also disposal. And when that microparticle containing sludge is spread, it has the opportunity to allow those microfibers to blow into the adjacent water bodies or flow on the surface waters into the ditches and then make their way into the system. So whether it's your home septic tank that you're pumping out and taking that waste to the septic wastewater treatment plant for treatment, or you flushing your toilet and it going there, ultimately it ends up in the same place. So
Thank you, David and Brooke and Lisa. This is a question for Ms. Bell. So this is a private members bill, and people are wondering, do all the parties support this bill, or what kind of support are you seeing, even from, for example, for the first reading? Can you talk a little bit about that?
The thing with first reading is you stand up, you introduce your bill, and you take it down to the clerk. It's maybe a 1-minute speech. So at this point, we don't have a good enough read on where all the parties are on this issue. What happens next is a bill can go to second reading, which is where it's debated on the floor for about half an hour, and then it's taken to a full vote. So any MPP in the House that day, there'll be MPPs representing all parties, will then vote yes or no whether they support the bill, and then it will go to committee. And then it gets, amendments get made, da-da-da-da-da. So we're at the first reading stage. There's two key pieces of information I want to share. One is that the government has the power to introduce this bill attached to any government bill they have and pass it any day they want. So they could introduce this bill and put it on the budget bill, which is coming up. That's one thing. Nothing is stopping them from doing it. That's their power. The second thing is that I would be happy to support organizing to have a coalition such as yours, literally create an Excel spreadsheet with all the MPPs, the 124 of us, and then it's a case of sitting down, communicating with each of them directly, setting up meetings with them and asking them whether they support it or not, so we can get to that key majority. The beauty of the Great Lakes is that many of the MPPs who are conservative do, and the reason why I say that is not to be partisan, but it's because they hold the power. They have an element of the Great Lakes in their riding. So they have people who deeply care about clean water, and they probably do too. So the organising opportunity rests with Ontarians and less what we can do in the legislature.
Thank you so much, MPP Bell. There's lots of people asking questions about and concerned about where the microfibers go after they've been collected. And I wonder, I don't think there's a formal system in place. They go to landfill, but I think, at some point, maybe something will be developed around that. I'm wondering, Lisa, if you have any comments in that direction.
Yeah, it's a question that comes up a lot. And I think it's a really good question because as we move towards a circular economy, we don't want there to be this linear path of it just ending up in landfills. One complicated thing is that we often have mixed loads of different materials, which makes material recovery more complicated. So if we were to do entirely polyester loads, you could, in theory, take all that polyester and then recycle it and turn it into something new. The reality is that we have this mixture of different fibers, and it's also there's other gunk in there too. So there isn't anything great that I've seen so far, but people are talking about it. Like if you could do these, and maybe at the commercial scale, it's more feasible to do these separated types of loads and then try to recover that resource. It hasn't been done yet, but it's something that I think would be really exciting to do. So yeah, the best case now is for it to go to landfill. But it's better than it going directly into the environment, I think.
So in that respect, at least if it's captured, would you say it's better to sort of turn towards non-synthetic fibers? I mean, we know that, there's still problems with non-synthetic fibers if they're not trapped, but is that a possible solution to helping with that issue?
Yeah, it could be. One issue with just banning synthetics, and that this has been tried before too in other jurisdictions. Why don't we just have a labeling scheme or a ban on on plastic fibers? So banning the nylon and polyesters of the world and keeping the other ones. But even most machine washable wool contains a thin layer of polyurethane to be able to actually put it in the washing machine. And then there are lots of synthetic chemicals and dyes. Cotton could be 1/3 chemicals by weight. So it really depends. You can have cotton and hemp that do not have chemicals and additives and dyes, or you can. So I think it's sort of hard to paint all of natural fibers with the same brush because there's so much variability, and research that I did for my PhD shows that cotton microfibers can also have an effect on the growth and survival and reproduction of animals like aquatic insects and fish. So while these natural fibers do break down more quickly, and that's important, they can still cause effects to wildlife.
And just sort of building on that, I understand there's more mounting research that fibers or microplastics and fibers, when they're in the environment, they can actually seem to pick up more chemicals and seem to cause more deformities than, when they're sort of studied in a lab and just sort of purely extracted. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we tested this by having polyester and cotton microfibers in a wastewater treatment plant and seeing sort of the slurry of chemicals that they pick up. And both cotton and polyester microfibers can pick up these chemicals from a wastewater treatment plant, which we know from tons of other research contains flame retardants and perfluorinated chemicals. There's a big chemical cocktail that passed through wastewater treatment plants. And in some cases, cotton, just because of the surface texture and the type of material, it can actually absorb more chemicals than the polyester fiber. So the chemical impacts from these natural fibers sometimes could be even greater. But yeah, these our clothing that we wear, they act as these passive samplers. So when we're in contaminated indoor environments, they can pick up chemicals. When they're passing through water and pass through contaminated things like wastewater treatment plants, they can also pick up these chemicals too.
Thanks, Lisa. I want to bring up a question that's being brought forward by some of our volunteers who have used filters. For sure, filters, require some work, but, and I'll direct this to Brooke. Can you talk about the issue of just emptying out the filter? And is there an easier way to kind of clean the filter bag?
Yeah. So this is the filter bag, to kind of depending how many people are in your household, how often you do laundry, how dirty your clothes are, if you have young kids or if you work in them outside or whatever it may be. Really depends how often you will have to clean out your filter. We say roughly about every 2 to 4 weeks to clean out your filter. If you wait to let it to dry is typically the easiest. It allows it to get a bit easier off the sides of it. You can use kind of some soft soap or something to clean the filter bag if needed. It's best to do it kind of fairly often to prevent any smell from occurring. And then also when cleaning the bag, to clean the filter itself, again, to prevent any kind of smell from starting. But it's important that the mesh bag is so fine. So we really recommend not using any, like I know some in the past have used like a toothbrush or something to kind of clean it, and that prevents damage to the bag. So either depending what works with you, what works, but either, waiting for it to dry so you can kind of pull off and it kind of creates this film, or if you need to do it while it's wet, kind of running it around the rim to pool all the fibers at the bottom so you can create kind of a handful and pull it out. So it is kind of, some things work really great for one household and some don't work as well for the other household. So it is kind of a learning curve, but yeah, it takes maybe under 5 minutes to clean this filter bag.
And I think probably bringing more attention to this issue, and part of policy would be to kind of invest in more technology. I mean, we're all first adopters here, and that's really, really important, but there'll be several innovations down the line. So part of the policy is to bring more money to make it even easier for people, I think, down the line.
Yeah, we're all so used to cleaning out our filters and our dryers, and it just becomes second nature with these filters on our washing machines.
I'm just going to turn to a little bit about, and maybe Lisa, you can address this question. There has been legislation successfully introduced and passed actually in France. And I think there is actually technology out there. Can you speak a little bit about where this is being also elevated around the world?
Yeah, and it's really interesting to zoom out from outside of Canada and seeing what's happening in other parts of the world, because there are other parts of the world too that have filters in washing machines already, especially in parts of the world where they aren't as obsessed with domestic dryers like we are here. So there are a lot of places like in East Asia and Southeast Asia that have lint traps on your washing machine because people don't use dryers. So they use these lint traps to remove lint, which are, of course, fibers. So the technology does exist. And as awareness has really increased on the microfiber issue, that there has been past legislation in other parts of the world that would require these filters to be built on new machines, like in France. There are a couple companies in Europe that are designing new machines down to smaller micron ranges than machines that are existing in Asia. So going down into even smaller size fractions and capturing more microfibers. So this would require new washing machines to have filters by, I think, 2024 in France. There was a bill in the UK that passed its second reading, I believe, just a couple weeks ago, and also a bill in Australia, and then a draft bill in California. So there's other parts of the world that are looking to Parry Sound, because Parry Sound was really the first place where this was tested at the scale beyond just a lab and the washing machine level. So the technology does exist. I don't know if any are available right now in North America, but if anybody knows, I'd be really interested to know.
I don't know at this point, but I have heard that Samsung is working on something with Patagonia, so we'll see. They've been very cagey answering my questions, so I think they're waiting for the legislation to pass. A common question that we get, and this will be the last question, is why can't this be treated at the wastewater treatment plant level? And maybe Lisa, I'll turn to you again to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, so in a way, it is. We know that wastewater treatment plants can remove 90 to 98% of the fibers that are the influent going into the wastewater treatment plant. But like David mentioned, that is captured in the sludge and often land applied as a fertilizer. So there's one of the largest emitters of microfibers to the environment is via that sludge entering terrestrial ecosystems when it's applied as a fertilizer. But even, 98 or 99% capture rate can still release millions of fibers per plant per day. That's a really big number. The problem with filtering at the wastewater treatment plant, and I've had the opportunity to tour many plants, which I think is so cool. I think, wastewater treatment plant operators are the unsung heroes of the world dealing with all of our waste. They are processing so much water. And to have a fine enough mesh to capture those fibers, you would need to do massively different retrofits. And across Canada, many wastewater treatment plants are just upgrading from primary to secondary, so having some sort of chemical chlorinated or UV treatment. And we're really not there yet to go the additional leap of a very, very fine like a filtration level, and it's for many places it's not feasible with the volume of water they're processing.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and thank you to everyone who participated in the question period. I think we've come to the end of the webinar. I want to thank you for your support, audience, and participation in this webinar on mass scaling the filter solution for microfiber waste from washing clothing. Georgian Bay Forever wants to especially thank Elisa Erdl, Shannon Farquharson, and Rupert Kindersley from the Georgian Bay Association, Phil Murphy-Rayam from the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, of course, MPP Jessica Bell, Brooke Harrison for speaking, and all the Georgian Bay Forever staff behind the scenes. And our deepest appreciation goes to our funders and donors. We really hope that you're inspired to take action. And if you appreciate our work, please consider donating to us at gbf.org. Every dollar really means a lot to us. So thanks again, and have a wonderful evening.